You know, there's this one virtue that feels like it's getting harder and harder to find these days, but it's just so powerful. I'm talking about humility. And to really get what it means, we're not just going to look up a definition. No, we're going to dive into the story of one truly extraordinary life.
Life is simple. We just make it complicated. I mean, you've probably heard that before, right? It's this idea that deep down, life doesn't have to be this big, messy thing. But man, we get so caught up in the noise, in all the ambition, the constant pressure to prove ourselves, and we kind of lose the plot.
So it's one thing to talk about humility, but what does it actually look like, in the real world, day to day? Well, to answer that, we've got to look at the story of a man who just embodied it. His life is basically the roadmap for this whole idea.
So let's meet him. Our case study is a man named Stephen Casai, but thousands of people knew him simply as Saga Steve. And his quiet, unassuming life offers one of the most profound lessons in character you'll probably ever come across.
He was just there. A fixture, a constant, someone people saw every single day. You know, the kind of person who can almost blend into the background of your life until you step back and realize they were actually in the foreground the whole time.
So how did this humility play out in real life? Well, you could find it in his simple, consistent act of service. And our story starts at Hillsdale College, which is where Steve worked for most of his life.
And I mean most of his life. We're talking about nearly 40 years. Just stop and think about that for a second. 4 decades, poured into the same place, serving the same community, and get this, it was his own alma mater. This, right here, was his daily mantra. To every single student, at every single meal, every single day, he'd offer this simple, kind greeting. It wasn't some grand, heroic act, but it was this incredibly consistent and genuine expression of care, repeated tens of thousands of times over the years. Now, what's really amazing is the discipline that was going on behind that smile. This wasn't just some job for him. This was a guy who got up at 4:30 in the morning for prayer and exercise. He took the time to memorize students' names and their meal card numbers. He walked everywhere, 4 to 6 miles a day, and never even owned a car. These were all those little choices he made when nobody was looking, and that's what built this incredible character everyone saw. But that's just scratching the surface, because the man doing this simple job day in and day out was way more accomplished than almost anybody there even knew. To them, this was his whole world, always dressed sharply in a suit and tie, always polite, always there, just a friendly face at the cafeteria door. And for most people, that's where the story ended.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because behind that consistent, humble service was a man of some pretty remarkable talents and intelligence.
Okay, you are not going to believe this. Steve wasn't just working at Hillsdale, he was a graduate. Not only that, he was on a state championship track team. Then he went and got a degree from a seminary. Oh, and on the side, he was a published writer on local history and a champion ping pong player. I mean, seriously, he had all this cool stuff he could have talked about, all these wins, but he never did. He just served. That right there is the heart of humility. Now, this is where the story takes a turn. What happens when the guy who spent his whole life serving everyone else suddenly needs to be served himself? What happens when a lifetime of giving runs into a moment of real need?
Late in his life, Steve got a devastating diagnosis: terminal brain cancer. The man who had been this pillar of strength and consistency for the whole community was now facing his own, very human vulnerability.
And this is where you see this powerful idea of reciprocity in action. What goes around comes around. All those decades of saying hello and thank you and enjoy your meal, well, they hadn't been forgotten. The kindness he had planted year after year came back to him 1,000 times over. The students, the alumni, the whole community, they just poured out their love and support for him.
In a handwritten letter he sent to the community, Steve just expressed how blown away he was. It's incredible to think about. He almost passed away without knowing the true depth of his own impact. It was only in his final days that he got to see the huge legacy his simple, humble service had actually built. So what's the takeaway here? What's the lasting impact of a life lived so humbly? What's left behind after a lifetime of just quiet service?
This really says it all, doesn't it? What he gave were these simple daily things: smiles, kind words, just being there. And what he left behind? Tangible, lasting tributes. 2 memorial plaques now hang right where he used to stand. A scholarship fund was created in his name. His consistent service became this enduring inspiration for what a life of character really, truly means. This was something Steve actually believed himself, and it's the core lesson of his story.
He wasn't trying to network or get ahead. He was just being a friend to every single person he met. And the way he did that was through tireless, cheerful service.
And so, Steve's story kind of leaves us with this big question to chew on, right? We're always so worried about making a splash, about our grand achievements, but what if our real legacy isn't found in any of that? What if it's found in the small, simple things we do for other people, day in and day out? In a world obsessed with going viral, maybe the most powerful thing you can do is just be kind, consistently. Maybe that is the simplest and the most profound legacy of all.